While cities burned, he vanished in plain sight. For years, authorities chased shadows, never realizing the devil was one of their own. The Pillow Pyro, or so he was known, a man with a twisted mind and a terrifying gift. He rarely made any mistakes, but rarely was about to catch up to him. One small fingerprint, and all the years of evading the law slipped right through his fingers. Just like that, the hunter became the hunted. But how did it come to this? Was it really a mistake, or did he want to get caught? John Leonard Orr was just a regular kid caught in a messy world. One of 3 boys, raised in a broken home after his parents' separation. When he was a sophomore in high school, his mother said she's leaving for Missouri. What sounded like a little vacation ended up being a 3-year estrangement from her family. Then she came back, and his folks got a divorce. Young John was confused and heartbroken. Life wasn't kind, but he didn't let it break him. After high school, John joined the U.S. Air Force. In 1967, he left for basic training. Just another young man in military uniform, learning discipline and honoring the chain of command. He soon transferred to the Air Force firefighting school and got stationed in Spain. That's where he tied the knot with his high school sweetheart. A new chapter, a fresh start, or so it seemed. By 1970, he was transferred to Montana, and a short time later, he was honorably discharged from the Air Force in April 1971. On paper, it looked clean, but John had already begun to show signs of friction. He openly admitted later that he didn't like his commanding officers. A quiet clue, one of the many cracks that no one seemed to notice. Back in Los Angeles, Orr tried to fit in again. He applied to 2 police departments and 2 fire departments. Around the same time, his daughter was born. A young dad trying to get it together, but things were actually falling apart. His marriage didn't last. He and his first wife split up soon after. Still, Orr wasn't ready to give up. He got invited to test for the LAPD. He passed the physicals, the written tests, but then came the psychiatric evaluation. He was given the Rorschach test and MMPI. He did not pass. The MMPI indicated that John has schizoid personality. He wanted to be a cop so badly he got an outside therapist to test him, and he passed. He confronted the LAPD's mental health specialist to show these results. It didn't matter. The LAPD sent him a cold letter. "You're not suitable." That rejection stung. It was the kind of wound that festers. Next up, the Los Angeles Fire Department. He tried again, ran the drills, took the exams, and again he failed. Not good enough, too slow, not sharp enough, not cut out for it. He was told no once again. But John was desperate. He wanted the badge, the authority, and the respect. And eventually, he found his way in through the Glendale Fire Department. It wasn't the top. In fact, it was dead last in LA County when it came to pay. But Orr didn't care. He just wanted to be one of them. And in March 1974, they let him in. He studied fire science at a local college, worked as a clerk at 7-Eleven and part-time as security at a Sears department store. But slowly, he carved his way forward. He earned a concealed carry permit. He applied to be fire investigator and got it. He wasn't just some rookie anymore. He rose to the rank of captain. People respected him, looked up to him, trusted him. But the thing about trust is, it can be a dangerous weapon in the wrong hands. How did a career-driven man suddenly turn into everyone's worst nightmare? October 10th, 1984 would be the day that changed everything. South Pasadena, California. It started like any other day. Families shopping and employees milling about. No one had the faintest idea that their lives were about to change forever. At Ole's Home Center, a massive hardware store in a busy shopping plaza, everything seemed normal until it wasn't. Without any warning, flames started to erupt and thick smoke poured out. Fire crews arrived, but it was already chaos. Screams echoed, people ran, and when the smoke finally cleared, the store was gone, completely destroyed. But worse than the wreckage were the lives lost. A 2-year-old boy, Matthew Troidel, his grandmother, Ada Deal, a young mother, Carolyn Krause, just 26, and a teenage employee, 17-year-old Jimmy Satina. The next day, investigators from all over Southern California showed up to look through the ashes. The official word was electrical fire, tragic but accidental. But then arrived John Orr. He didn't agree. He walked through the ruins, eyes sharp. He wasn't just looking, he was hunting. And he said it loud and clear. This wasn't an accident. This was arson. And he was right, because he knew who did it. It was him who lit the match. The fire had been set deliberately, right where polyurethane products were stacked. It was the perfect fuel. The fire caught fast, burned hot, and flashed over in seconds. Too quick for anyone to escape. But why would a fire investigator, a captain, someone sworn to protect, do this? Some believe he wanted recognition, that deep down, Orr needed the spotlight. He wanted people to see how sharp he was, how he could crack cases no one else could. But what if the only way to prove he was the best was by setting the fire himself? He wanted even more, and so came the next target. In 1987, a fire investigator convention was held in Fresno. Nothing unusual, just professionals networking, sharing notes. But as soon as the event ended, fires started popping up in Bakersfield. Not just any fires, suspicious ones, too close for comfort. Among the debris, investigators found something strange, a notebook paper used in a time delay device. But there was one small mistake this time, a single fingerprint, one that didn't match anyone in their system. Captain Marvy G. Casey from Bakersfield started connecting the dots. He believed the arsonist was one of them, someone inside the fire investigation community, a wolf among sheep, specifically someone from Los Angeles. By March 1989, more fires were set, this time near another fire investigator conference in Pacific Grove. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Casey compared the list of attendees from both conferences. Only 10 names appeared on both. John Orr was one of them. But when they compared fingerprints, Orr was cleared. His print didn't match. At least, not yet. Flash forward to late 1990 and early 1991. Southern California once again found itself in flames. More fires, more destruction. But now the fires had a signature: pillows. The arsonist was targeting stores that sold pillows, mattresses, and soft furnishings. Flammable, devastating. The Pillow Pyro Task Force was formed, a name that would soon make headlines across the country. On March 29, 1991, during a regular meeting of the Fire Investigators Regional Strike Team, FIRST for short, a flyer was circulated. It described the method of the suspected arsonist. One investigator, Tom Campuzano, passed it around. Scott Baker from the California State Fire Marshal's office took one look and thought back to Captain Casey's suspicions. He told Campuzano about the previous fires, the fingerprint, and the idea that the arsonist was someone inside the fire service, someone hiding in plain sight. Campuzano didn't waste time. He met with Casey, got the old fingerprint, and thanks to better fingerprint tech and a new database, they ran it again. And this time, it hit the target. April 17, 1991. The fingerprint matched John Orr's left ring finger. He had applied for law enforcement years ago. Remember that failed LAPD application? That rejection left his print in the system. The very same print now tied him to a crime scene. And just like that, years of suspicion, doubt, and confusion boiled down to one thing: a fingerprint on a piece of notebook paper. But here's what doesn't sit right. Orr was smart, too smart. He knew how investigations worked. He knew how to cover tracks. So how did he leave behind something so careless? By the early 90s, John Orr had gone from respected fire investigator to prime suspect in one of California's largest manhunts for a serial arsonist. The evidence was stacking up, but authorities weren't quite ready to pounce. Not yet. They wanted to be sure, to catch him in the act, and to fully understand the scale of what they were dealing with. So they watched him for months. In May 1991, Orr attended a fire investigators conference in San Luis Obispo, California. Unbeknownst to him, a tracking device had been planted in his personal vehicle. But Orr, being ironically a highly skilled investigator himself, discovered it. Panicking, he drove straight to a police explosives range, fearing the device was a bomb. Law enforcement, already on edge, scrambled. The first group had to intervene. Orr was told the device was just a hoax, a fake, nothing to worry about. It was a lie, but it worked. Because what Orr didn't know was that a second tracking device had already been slipped into his official city vehicle in November that same year. With that device in place, authorities kept a watchful eye, and they didn't have to wait long. When Orr turned up suspiciously close to yet another fire, that was the final matchstick. A federal grand jury issued an indictment, and on December 4, 1991, Orr was arrested. But interestingly, the charges didn't include the Ole's Home Center fire, the one that killed 4 people in 1984. Instead, Orr was hit with charges for a string of other fires set over the years. The deadly South Pasadena blaze was still being re-examined, and that's when things got weird. While searching Orr's home, investigators found a self-penned manuscript titled Points of Origin. It was a fictional novel, or so he claimed, but the story centered on a fireman who was secretly a serial arsonist. The book described methods of fire setting in obsessive detail. including how to build time-delay incendiary devices using rubber bands, cigarettes, and matches, techniques identical to those found at real-life crime scenes. One particular passage depicted a fire in a hardware store, eerily similar to the one at Ole's. Coincidence? Not a chance. Orr insisted the book was fiction. Aaron Stiles, the main character, was a composite of criminals he'd arrested. A character study, nothing more. But investigators weren't buying it. It felt more like a diary than a novel, except in this story, the villain was the author. Federal prosecutor Mike Cabral, who would later lead the state case, described it as the most brazen confession he'd ever seen, just wrapped up in paperback form. In July of 1992, after a lengthy trial, a federal jury in Fresno convicted Orr on 3 counts of arson. He was acquitted of 2 others. Judge Oliver Wanger handed down a 30-year sentence. Orr, ever defiant, continued to claim he was innocent. But a year later, facing additional charges and out of money to fund a defense, he pled guilty to 3 more arsons as part of a deal. In return, he was granted parole from federal prison in 2002. But that wasn't the end, not even close. By November 1994, California prosecutors finally brought forward the big guns. Orr was indicted on 21 more arson counts, and this time, 4 counts of first-degree murder related to the 1984 Ole's fire. With the stakes at their highest, Cabral announced he would seek the death penalty, but he made an offer. If Orr agreed to a life sentence without parole and gave a full confession in court, detailing every fire he had ever set from his youth to the present, he would take the death penalty off the table. Orr refused. He would rather gamble his life than admit guilt. The trial lasted for months. When the jury returned its verdict in 1998, they found him guilty on all 4 murder charges and 20 of the 21 arson counts. The only count dropped was a fire set at the Warner Brothers back lot, dismissed at the prosecution's request. The jury deadlocked. 8 jurors voted for death, 4 voted for life. That was enough to spare Orr from the death chamber. Instead, the judge sentenced him to 4 life terms without parole, 1 for each of the lives lost in 1984. On top of that, 21 more years for the fires he'd started. The state sentence was to be served after Orr completed his federal term. In 2000, a California appeals court trimmed the sentence ever so slightly, removing 9 years, because one brush fire was deemed incidental. But the rest of his punishment stood. In the eyes of the court, John Leonard Orr was a mass murderer, an arsonist, and a traitor to his profession. When Orr finished his federal time in 2002, he was transferred to California State Prison, Centinela, where he remains to this day, serving a life sentence. There is no parole, no second chances, just the heat of the California desert and the memory of lives lost in fires he once promised to fight. According to many investigators and an FBI profiler, he was one of the most destructive serial arsonists in American history. Federal ATF agent Mike Matassa, one of the key figures in bringing Orr down, believes the numbers speak for themselves. Between 1984 and 1991, Orr may have set nearly 2,000 fires across Southern California. Fires that destroyed businesses, forests, and homes. Fires that killed 4 innocent people in a blaze of confusion and chaos. Fires that shook communities and put firefighters, his own brothers in arms, in harm's way. After Orr's arrest in 1991, the number of brush fires in the foothills near Los Angeles dropped by over 90%. Like a ghost, disappearing with the light, the blazes stopped almost overnight. But for all the fire and destruction he left behind, there was another kind of ruin Orr couldn't escape: the damage to his own family. His daughter, Lori Orr, once stood by him. She testified in court, humanizing the man who had been painted as a monster. That emotional testimony, many believe, swayed the jury away from voting unanimously for the death penalty. But as the evidence piled up and the truth became harder and harder to deny, Lori's faith crumbled. She would eventually break off all contact with her father, publicly acknowledging that she believed he was guilty. From that moment on, Orr became truly alone. A man who lived and died by fire, burned by the very obsession that once gave him purpose. But what do you think? Was justice served? Let us know in the comments below, and give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more stories just like this one. Thank you.